Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I'm back with another video. Today we're back on the Nazis, guys. It's been a while, but they have come back around and resurfaced on this channel once more. Now, specifically, I'm going to be talking about Colonia Dignidad. What is Colonia Dignidad, I hear some of you cry? Well, Colonia Dignidad is a compound in Chile. It's a location where some Nazis escaped capture, they escaped justice, and they set up a Nazi utopia in South America. But this place was not a utopia at all, not even for the German people that went there, let alone the locals. This place was hell on earth. So let's get into it, guys. Let's talk about Colonia Dignidad. So Colonia Dignidad was founded in 1961 by ex-Nazi medic Paul Schaefer. Before coming to Chile, Schaefer actually attempted to start his own orphanage back in Germany. However, two mothers that lived at the orphanage accused him of molesting children, so Schaefer fled Germany to escape any punishment for those charges. But it needs to be noted, this man began getting a bit of a following before the accusations. A bit of a religious cult type scenario was going on, and when he fled to Chile, he actually took 70 of these cult-like followers with him, as well as a load of kidnapped German children. He fled to South America, where he had heard stories of other Nazi hierarchies fleeing through hidden channels shortly after the end of World War II. He followed in their footsteps and regained contact with them when he reached South America. He turned his gaze to Chile, to a plot of land 70,000 acres in size, idyllic mountain ranges and a gorgeous river flowing through. Perfect to cultivate a new community. Using Nazi gold and money, which of course was stolen from all of those victims from World War II, he bought the land, and it was there that he began to build Colonia Dignidad. Now, when the colony was up and running, they actually imported children from Germany and the surrounding Chilean areas until the end of Schaefer's leadership of Colonia Dignidad. All in all, Colonia Dignidad at its peak grew to have around 350 residents. But as I said, this was no utopia, guys, even though that's how Schaefer pitched it to the people coming over from Germany to join him. No, this was hell on earth. This was perhaps what the Nazis had hypothesized society would be should they have won World War II and that Third Reich had succeeded. The genders were separated. Children were separated from their parents and raised by aunties. Sex was strictly forbidden. Child labour began at 6 years old. Every single person that was under the hierarchy, under the ex-Nazi ranking officers, would be put to work. Laborious work from 6 years old all the way through to your old age. The days would be long. Discipline was the next level. But all of this hard labour created a community that did not rely on the outside world for anything. There was no reason for anyone to leave the compound, which is just as well, because no one was allowed to leave the compound. Bruce Falconer wrote an article called The American Scholar, which describes Colonia Dignidad incredibly. The outer perimeter of Colonia Dignidad was marked by 8-foot fences topped with barbed wire, which armed groups of men patrolled day and night with German shepherds and Doberman attack dogs. Guards in observation posts equipped with shortwave radios, telephones, binoculars, night vision equipment and telephoto cameras scanned the landscape for intruders. These were of course imaginary, but if if invaders were to succeed in getting through the perimeter, they would come upon a second tier of inner defences. Strands of copper wire hidden around the village which, if stepped on, triggered a silent alarm. Doors and windows in most buildings were equipped with armoured shades that could be drawn shut in the event of an invasion. Dormitories were outfitted with alarms and surveillance cameras, and the entire village sat atop an extensive network of tunnels and underground bunkers. When the alarm sounded, as it frequently did during practice drills, men belonging to the security force grabbed their rifles and waited on their doorstep for instructions. With no genuine external enemies to fight, Schaefer and his most trusted lieutenants turned their energies inward. The practice of confession provided them with plenty of people to punish. The guilty were starved, threatened with dogs, or beaten sometimes by Schaefer himself, more often though by others acting on his orders. The harshest treatment was reserved for those who, for one reason or another, Schaefer simply didn't like. He called them the rebels. They could be identified by their clothing. The men wore red shirts and white trousers, the women potato sacks over their long dresses. The other colonials despised them, usually without even knowing why. Schaefer was clearly a piece of shit, right? He was a Nazi for a start, but he was a very mean man. He was a very evil man. In this article, it also says a story about how Schaefer treated the children, and it's just, I think this just highlights just what a piece of shit this man really was. All challenges to Schaefer's authority, real or imaginary, were rooted out and destroyed. This is how insecure this man was, right? He needed to destroy Santa Claus. Yes, you heard that right. Santa Claus. Are you ready for this? Because this is baffling. Nothing says you got a little dick like what this man did right here. Okay, so no one inspired greater love and admiration among the children of the Colonia than Santa Claus. It is said that in the days shortly before Christmas one year in the mid-1970s, Schaefer gathered the Colonia's children, loaded them onto a bus and drove them out to a nearby river where he told them Santa was coming to visit. The boys and girls stood excitedly along the riverbank whilst an older colonial in a fake beard and a red and white suit floated towards them on a raft. Schaefer pulled out a pistol from his belt and fired, seeming to wound Santa, who tumbled into the water where he thrashed about before disappearing below the surface. It was a charade, but Schaefer turned to the children assembled before him and said that Santa was now dead. From that day forward, Schaefer's birthday was the only holiday ever celebrated in Colonia Dignidad. It just kind of shows what a sad, pathetic piece of shit this man was. And I think that kind of extends out to Nazis in general. So as I said earlier, right, so they made themselves so self-sufficient they didn't require any services from the outside world. However, they had services that the outside world could want from them. They had lots of food because they had lots of money and they had lots of means to cultivate it themselves. They also had their own hospital. Now, if you can think of any doctor from the Nazi regime, we've done a video on him, that you would not want to build and run a hospital, it's probably Dr. Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, the man who tortured twins, he tortured children, he tortured people in general, in the name of eugenics, in the name of furthering the Aryan race, in the name of creating a solution to the Jewish problem that the Nazis kept stating that they had, and also to crack the code of twins, which apparently he later went on to do because there was a Brazilian village that he lived in or nearby that has an exponential rate of twins in it, so it's alleged that he actually cracked the code as to how twins work. But of course, if you can crack the code on how to create twins and you're trying to create a new race, then obviously the race's output will be doubled every time you have children. So that's what he was trying to do. Proper piece of shit, right? There's a running theme here. Nazis, piece of shit. But anyway, Dr. Mengele was the leader, the head of this hospital at Colonia Dignidad, and so the locals thought, great, you know, a new fancy hospital that we can go to, and they really shouldn't have done that. They really shouldn't have gone there, but apparently he still, you know, liked to specialise with children, and some of the torture that went on there is disgusting. But then again, it's the Nazis, so it probably shouldn't surprise you too much. But I've got written here in my notes that, of course, the experimentation continued in South America, just like he was back in his homeland. So allegedly he would test on the local children, doing things like throwing them out of windows to see how much damage was done, breaking their bones to see how quickly they could be nursed back together, being set on fire to see how they could nurse third-degree burns, raped them, just broke them in general. Between the 1960s and the 1990s. Now, I don't know why, or maybe it's because I was born in the 90s, but it seems horrifying that Nazis were experimenting on children all the way up to the 90s. But of course, for all we know, they could still be doing it today. Who knows? The Chilean president of the 1960s, 70s wasn't the nicest guy. Bit of a tyrannical leader himself, right? And he realised, shit, I've got a group of Nazis living in a colony nearby. We could work together, because the Nazis, if there's one thing they're good at, it's torturing people. So anyone that defected from his government, anyone that opposed his rule, any traitors to the state, he'd have them delivered to Colonia Dignidad, where they were tortured in horrific, unimaginable ways, and then any information that the Nazis got from them, they would ship it back to the president. So they had a wonderful working relationship, which is how Colonia Dignidad was allowed to be there, because at the end of the day, it was in the Chilean government's interest at the time, regardless of the horrific stuff that they were doing there. Now, of course, some people escaped. Those people told their stories, and actually it was the United Nations that blew the lid on this originally. So a Human Rights Commission report released in October 1976 stated, in Colonia Dignidad there is a specially equipped underground torture centre with small soundproof cells, hermetically sealed. The detainees' heads are covered with leather hoods, which are stuck to their faces with chemical adhesives. In these cells, interrogations are carried out through electronic equipment, including loudspeakers and microphones, whilst detainees are tied naked to metal frames to receive electric shocks. The UN's report also documented dogs trained to attack and destroy the sexual organs of both sexes, experiments testing torture tolerances limits, and the use of specially psychoactive drugs on subjects. The UN's commission found that the DINA-sponsored torture chamber of Colonia Dignidad, the DINA, I believe, was a government section of Chile. So they sponsored torture chambers of Colonia Dignidad and were being used as research centres to continue Mengelé's work of refining the art of torture. Prisoners had allegedly been subjected to different experiments without any interrogation. Prisoners claim that torture is personalised through an initial interrogation which establishes the personal traits of the individual. This data is then used to program the torture session so that the result is a totally debilitated person who will comply with any demand. This was the official United Nations statement that they had got from prisoners that escaped Colonia Dignidad. This was what was officially happening in this hellhole. So people did come forward and try to, reveal what was happening. In 1977, another former prisoner came forward. Juan Munoz was a Socialist Party member turned DINA collaborator. Right? Munoz was later imprisoned by Pinochet for trying to protect an old leftist friend. In a taped deposition in the Catholic Church's Human Rights Group in Santiago, Munoz identified Colonia Dignidad as one of the several places where disappeared political prisoners were taken by security forces. Shortly after giving this deposition, Juan Munoz was found stabbed to death by parties unknown. So a lot of the people coming forward against the Chilean government, against Colonia Dignidad, were killed for doing so. Now, this is a conspiracy in itself, but it is heavily theorised that Hitler actually escaped and held refuge at Colonia Dignidad at different times throughout the 60s, 70s and 80s. Now, this is almost a conspiracy for itself. If you want me to do a video on the conspiracy of how Hitler escaped Germany, how all the evidence points to Hitler not committing suicide in the bunker, then I'll happily do that. But if we just gloss over that for a second and just say that he did escape to South America it is heavily theorised that he was at Colonia Dignidad. Apparently it wouldn't have been very hard for them to do, because in this place you have to understand every resident of Colonia Dignidad lived in massive fear. If they said jump, you said how high. Okay, and there were areas of this place, massive areas of the compound, where you couldn't go unless you were a high ranking officer in the hierarchy. So there are plenty of opportunities for Hitler's demise to remain intact. You know, the story couldn't leak, oh well, I saw him at Colonia Dignidad, you know, or anyone that escaped perhaps could go on to say Hitler was at Colonia Dignidad, because they hid him so well. So clearly, regardless of whether it was Hitler or not, Colonia Dignidad housed some massive monstrosities and was just essentially another torture chamber, but on a 70,000 acre level. They tortured local people, they tortured their own people. It seemed that for once the Nazis weren't discriminating, they were just torturing anyone and everyone that they could, showing the true extent of how evil they really are. Nowadays, it's changed its name, it's now Villa Bavaria, and it seems like an idyllic place. They even advertise for tourism. But there was a documentary on the History Channel, Hunting Hitler, where they went there and they uncovered the truth of what is going on there. They are incredibly proud of their Nazi heritage. They are third, fourth generation Nazis. They look back on what the Nazis did with mass pride. They have all of their medals displayed in the barber shops, in the grocery stores, in the bakers, on the walls. They are incredibly proud of their heritage. They are incredibly racist. And some people that escaped there in the late 90s do still believe that there is bad, evil things going on in Villa Bavaria. So it would appear that in a sense it is that Nazi utopia that Paul Schaefer intended to create back in 1961. But who knows, guys, that's all just allegedly, possibly, maybe. What would your money be on, guys? Please let me know down below in the comments. I read all of them. Thank you so much. Please hit that like button, share, subscribe. If you want to become a patron, please do. That'd really help me out. As well as maybe follow me on Twitch. I stream all the time on twitch.tv/Dudey Rhino. If you want to support me, all the links are down below. Thank you guys, I really do appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Sweet one, geese.